Welcome, and thank you for coming to our 6th annual Interdisciplinary Research Forum online. We know how busy and overwhelmed you are, so thank you for taking the time. I'd like to present our first poster presentation. Dr. Diane Bates, Professor of Sociology and Anthropology, Dr. Kim Pearson, Assistant Professor of Journalism and Professional Writing, and Dr. Monisha Pulimood, a Professor of Computer Science.
Thank you, Kathy. And it's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to just quickly share my slides. So give me just a second while I start up that broadcast. All right, so you may have heard some of this before, but we do want to present a little bit more information and data specifically about the NSF-funded study today. So today we're going to focus on the collaborating across boundaries model that we are implementing with funding and so Diane Bates, Kim Pearson, and I are all co-PIs on this NSF-funded grant. So we have two closely related projects. One is focused on studying how undergraduates are able to learn and be more deeply engaged in science learning. And the other one is about collaborating across boundaries, basically to foster faculty-student engagement. So they're very closely connected. One is funded through the National Science Foundation, and the other one is funded through an endowment, the Barbara Myers Pearson Chair in Faculty-Student Engagement. So I am currently the chair for that position. And so, you know, these two are connected, but one is focused on STEM, and it is the study of how students learn and what are effective practices when collaborating across boundaries. The other one, the one funded through TCNJ, has no limitations in terms of the disciplines that are involved. So that's the main difference. So most of the rest of this presentation is going to focus on the NSF-funded study. The model is similar. We have two courses from two different disciplines. One of them has to be within the science STEM area. And here we define science pretty broadly. It's basically all the disciplines that are funded by NSF. So that would include the some of the social sciences. So it's not just science, technology, engineering, and math, but includes a few other fields as well. So the model is two courses. One must be science, and the third collaborator is a community partner. And our hypothesis is that, you know, well, what we're trying to address here is that as we realize that our problems that we have to address are getting more and more complex, it isn't sufficient for our graduates to have a good understanding of their own discipline. They need to get a deeper understanding of how their discipline fits within the broader context. But it's also very important for all to have a deep understanding of STEM concepts and science concepts. And this is for STEM and non-STEM majors. But, you know, given the way our current academic programs work, often non-STEM majors do not get as, they're not able to perhaps take as many science courses and get that deeper understanding of STEM concepts as they might if they were in a STEM major. But we want to see if there are ways in which we could have these students also engage more deeply in the STEM concepts by collaborating with STEM majors. And so, our hypothesis is that by immersing students in interdisciplinary collaborative courses where STEM and non-STEM majors work together and with community partners, so they're working on real problems that our community, our surrounding neighbors are facing, and that will result in deeper STEM learning for everyone. So we are focused on problem solving in a gender neutral and culturally and ethnically diverse community. So that is where we are focusing. And so our research questions are to identify what are the best practices for interdisciplinary and community engaged pedagogies. Or we also want to study the effectiveness of this collaborative model as an approach for improving undergraduate learning outcomes across all majors, including for students who are from historically underrepresented groups. Diane and Kim, please do jump in if you think I missed something. So through the NSF funding, we can support faculty, TC&J faculty, in adapting existing courses into this collaborative model. And we can provide stipends for the faculty and support them as they work through the logistics of the collaborations. The Center for Community Engagement has been very helpful in helping us identify appropriate community partners for all the various types of courses that we're interested in offering in this model. And we also have workshops and all kinds of resources available for helping faculty figure out how to make this work. And so we have identified STEM-focused collaborations across 3 disciplinary groups. One is STEM. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are including other areas that are funded by NSF. And so social, behavioral, and economic sciences are included. And then we have the other disciplines, which basically are disciplines that are not covered by, funded by the NSF, but we think, those disciplines and those students will definitely benefit from this model as well. And we are assessing student learning outcomes using multiple measures. And so this is just gives you a sense of how each year we have these different collaborations. The initials represent the faculty who are involved. So in the first year, it was basically Diane, Kim, and I collaborating with 3 other faculty members. And then for this academic year, each of us, so there's now 6 of us, each of us is collaborating with 1 other person. And we're all making sure that we are with disciplines that with faculty teaching courses in other disciplines. And we all have community partner collaborators, and the project is always science focused. Now I'm going to hand over to Diane.
Okay, so thank you, Monisha, for providing the outline for it. The primary focus for the rest of the presentation has to do with what we did last year. So as Monisha said, we're in our 2nd year of what was initially planned as a 3-year model, but particularly given the disruptions that we've experienced with the COVID pandemic, we are anticipating a 4th year, a no-cost extension to complete some of our work. But so our primary goal in this first year was really to validate the measures. We had used measures from some other researchers. So primarily we were looking at some self-assessments from the students in terms of their sense of civic responsibility and civic efficacy. And so we used those two from previous research that's been validated by other folks. And then we are using a direct measure of scientific literacy called the Test of Scientific Literacy Skills, or the TOSLs, that helps us. It was really developed for biology students, undergraduate biology students, but it was general enough that we thought it might work as a pre and post measure for the classes. So basically the students take the TOSLs test or assessment towards the beginning of the semester, and then they take it again at the end of the semester. And we did this primarily because we had done some previous research with Quebec, which was another NSF-funded grant that Monisha and Kim were the PIs for. And we had a lot of good data saying that student self-assessment of their learning definitely improved, but we didn't have a direct measure. So one of the things that we realized that we wanted to do is to do a more direct measure. And so we have adopted this TOSLs, which, like I said, was developed primarily for undergraduate biology students. So what we, oops, now I can't control there we go. So we had the 3 partnerships last year. So we ended up with a total number of 73 cases that we could analyze, where we had both the pre-test and the post-test. And what we found is that, again, the self-assessment tended to be robust, which didn't surprise us, because not only had we seen this published previously, but we had also used it in the Quebec study. And so we knew that these were pretty robust measures, at least of self-assessment. And you can see, if you're unfamiliar with statistics, basically an alpha is a statistical measure that looks for coherency in the way that people answer questions on in the index. So for each item in the index, the question has to do, or the alpha measures how consistently people answer them. And it's used as a measure of robustness, or sort of measurement reliability. And what we found, again, is that the self-assessments tended to be pretty strong. The civic efficacy self-assessment was not validated in the pre-test. Not quite sure why that was the case, but it was validated in the post-test. So in any case, we're very confident that we should continue to use these measures of self-assessment moving forward. We had a little bit more of a problem with the TOSLs test. And in fact, we are certainly considering maybe we should be using other ones. One of the things that we have we have an undergraduate research student working with us this semester who's in the iSTEM education program. And we've asked her to start doing an inventory of options for us. But for the TOSLs, it's broken down into sort of different learning goals within the TOSLs. So there's making valid arguments, using scientific sources, the use and misuse of science, scientific research design, and none of their predetermined sort of sub-indices were valid using the sort of alpha measure in either the pre or the post test. But when we looked at the test as a whole, it was. And so that's a sort of an interesting finding. It means that we're not quite ready to toss the TOSLs at this point in time. There's definitely something that we can use to measure it. We're just not entirely confident that the sort of sub-indexes within the TOSLs exam are going to be super useful for us moving forward. We do want to acknowledge, though, that, you know, last semester was the semester where we did the sort of abrupt switch or abrupt pivot to online learning, or remote learning. And so we're not 100% confident that we're really capturing learning last semester that we have done in previous years. This is one of the reasons why the comparison with the partnerships for this semester, which Dr. Pulimood is doing with Maggie Leger and criminology, and we have a control group actually this semester as well for someone who's in a course, for students that are in courses that are not in the CAB program, to just sort of measure that instrument. So we will be evaluating these, particularly the TOSLs moving forward. We're pretty confident in the the robustness of the self-assessment measures. Then the other thing that we did last semester is this journal called Science, Education, and Civic Engagement, which is really oriented towards the sort of incorporation of community-based projects into the science curriculum, both in K through 12, but also in higher education. Did a special issue about teaching through the early stages of the coronavirus. And we were able to actually get a very brief sort of research note into this, because in addition to the student learning outcomes that we were evaluating and assessing and validated in the previous table, we were also collecting data from the professors that were teaching these courses. So we have them do journals on a regular basis where they're answering specific prompts. We have workshops that we were recording and transcribing and analyzing, and now we're video recording them. And then we have an end of the year assessment, which is done by an outside evaluator. And so that's a much longer sort of summative for the year type evaluation. And so we had all of this qualitative data from the professor's perspective that we were able to draw on to sort of develop this research note. And, you know, we had three main findings, but I think the one that we wanted to emphasize in this particular presentation was that working with community partners really did add an additional difficulty or an additional thing that we had to manage with this pivot to remote learning. And a lot of it had to do with the community partners were making exactly the same pivots at exactly the same time. And so what we found is that the projects that had been originally planned had to be remarkably reconceptualized as we were going, like so much of what happened last spring. But one of the things that we can take from this experience is that one is that in situations of sort of insecurity, that what's known as indirect service, so that's working with the staff of community organizations as opposed to trying to work directly with sort of clients and the public, it was a lot easier to pivot those types of projects, community-based projects, than it was for those that require sort of a continuous interaction with community members. And so while we're still in the process of, you know, looking at hybrid semesters, definitely in the spring and potentially, you know, maybe into the fall, hopefully not, right? But moving forward, that those indirect service, those indirect relationships or indirect community engaged projects might be more suitable in situations where there is some insecurity about planning and social contact and these sorts of things. So our last slide is really just, you know, we are continuing this. We are looking to go for at least one more year, probably 2 more years, more likely than not 2 more years. And so we're also, in addition to presenting our early findings, we're also very interested in recruiting people who are interested in the project. So we do invite professors that are interested in collaborating to join us, but the entire campus community is certainly welcome to participate in our workshops, our colloquia, our discussions. We work a lot with the Pearson folks, who just happens to be, you know, one of our co-PIs, to try to find places that build these sort of cross-cutting questions and answers and into workshops and colloquia across campus. But there's our contact information if anyone does have any additional questions. So are there any additional questions that anybody might have?
Diane?
I just wanted to add a comment.
Oh, yes, please, Kim.
Yes, and that is that one of the challenges of the abrupt shift to remote learning was that based on the collaboration that Monisha and I had run before, we had, you know, the CAB model requires several face-to-face meetings between the collaborating classes and some of which the community partner participates in. And in that dynamic environment, there is part of the task of that is to create a common language across disciplines. It's part of the process of sort of harmonizing expectations and helping students to come to consensus about how they're bringing the knowledge from their respective classes and disciplines to bear upon the project. And without that contact, we had, we were suddenly challenged to find other ways of adjusting, and meeting those expectations and doing that kind of troubleshooting. And that's something that we've taken into our planning for this year. And with the help of the feedback from the workshops and the journaling and the feedback from our external reviewer. Since even if we are, even for those classes that will have some in-person meetings next semester, the collaborative meetings will still be online, just because of the public health requirements. So.
I would add to that this semester, my class is collaborating with Maggie Leger's criminology class. And our students are meeting remotely. One challenge that we do not have right now is meeting space. So in past semesters, when we've had to have multiple classes meet together, at TCNJ, our spaces are designed for smaller classes. So it's always been a challenge to find larger spaces just for those meetings. And so now with we're meeting online, that is no longer a problem. We don't have to, students are meeting in their groups online, so they don't have to deal with commuting and other challenges. They don't have much of a life outside of coursework anyways, so they have more time to meet and do their work on their projects. So there is some positives that I hope we can continue to build on as well.
Yeah, I want to have, Krista has a question in the chat that says, my question before I step out, because she has to leave at 9:55. Do you have any thoughts about how this model might be applied to a virtual international project? The answer to that, and she says, the Bologna project might be, or the Bologna site might be a place. Actually, Marla Jacks and Matt Cathell, so Marla's in WGSS and Matt is in iSTEM and engineering. They're actually doing an international project this semester. So we'll have a better sense of how that might work. The truth of the matter is that moving the projects into an all virtual environment, which we had to do because of the public health situation, even for folks that are working with like Ewing-based partners next semester, it does open up the possibility of a sort of global community. And we're actually going to be trying that out then with Marla and Matt. So Krista, check back with us this time next year.
Also, the scholarship, the research that this project is built on does include work that has been done involving interinstitutional and international collaboration. So there is some scholarship on that. There can be challenges, just simple things like time zones can be a challenge. Stability of internet connections can be a challenge, but these are, the kinds of challenges that you could, easily anticipate.
I noticed, Diane, that your overall index looked pretty good.
Yeah.
There's promising results there. So, I mean, really, a little more use. It could be that, in another context that some of the sub indices will come up. Or it could be that, it's been over conceptualized and it really is just a general measure. So.
Well, that's entirely true. And I think that's one of the reasons, I think that's one of the reasons that we're investigating other options, but we're not throwing it out because the overall, especially in the post-test, did meet the sort of criteria of the alpha 0.7, which is very promising. And in fact, even the fact that it was not coherent in the pre-test and is in the post-test is certainly suggests something happened. But it's really hard for us to speculate about learning that happened last semester for learning that happens in any other point in time before or after. So it's fine. And that's why we didn't really analyze the student data very much. We looked at it in terms of our capacity to validate the measures, but we didn't really look at the student learning as much, just because last semester was so anomalous from a learning perspective. But it was interesting, and it was encouraging that the overall TOSLs was at least valid. Well, I know we're actually a little bit over from what we originally had hoped. And I know that Krista has to leave us, but are there any other questions? Otherwise, I will turn things back over to Kathy. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Monisha, Kim, or I. We're happy to talk at any point in time.
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you on behalf of the OGSR. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you for you who've taken time out of your busy schedules in this unique semester to join us. I think the phrase that we can walk away with from this one is toss the tossles. Should we toss the tossles? And
we're not tossing the tossles.
We're not tossing the tossles, right? So the other thing is I just want to plug the next presentation at 10:30. We have 2 more presentations this morning. We break next week, and then we come back for the Wednesday after that, and we have another Wednesday morning of presentations. So if you can, do join us. It just makes it so much more fun. And so thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicely done.
Thanks, Tim.